There is a quiet kind of pain that hums beneath the noise of modern life, the one that makes people scroll endlessly at night, searching for something they cannot name. It is the ache of being overwhelmed by your own mind, of feeling that your thoughts have turned against you, of waking up tired. Even after sleep in 2025, mental health has become both a public crisis and a private battlefield, and despite all the apps, the self-help books, the therapy jargon, something essential still feels missing. People know the language of anxiety, but not the rhythm of peace. They know the symptoms, but not the soul. And this is where William James quietly returns, like a forgotten teacher with an old key to a very modern lock. He reminds us that before psychology became data and diagnosis, it was philosophy, it was the art of understanding how to live. He once said that the greatest discovery of his generation was that a human being can change his life by changing his attitude of mind in 2025. This idea sounds almost too simple, but that simplicity hides something revolutionary. James saw consciousness as a living stream, not a fixed machine, and in that flowing awareness, he believed we could redirect our energy toward healthier patterns of being. He didn't talk about dopamine or burnout, but he understood what they feel like. He called it the divided self, the part of you that knows what is right for you and the part that keeps choosing what hurts you. He believed the healing begins when those two parts stop fighting and start listening. Think of your mind as a field constantly tilled by thoughts. Each thought leaves a trace. The ones you repeat most often become pathways, the ruts of habit and emotion. If your days are filled with thoughts of failure or fear, those grooves deepen until they feel like identity. But James taught that these grooves can be changed not by force but by faith. He believed in the power of voluntary attention, the ability to choose where to place your mind and hold it there. He called this focus the very root of character. And this one lesson could transform how you approach mental health today, because anxiety often begins where your attention is trapped between the past and the future. Take, for instance, a young designer named Mara, who wakes every day with a dull heaviness. She scrolls through other people's lives before she even breathes. She tells herself she's not enough, not fast enough, not happy enough by noon. She's already behind in her own story. One night she tries something new. She lights a candle, writes one sentence beginning with "I am here." She forces herself to describe the scent of the candle, the hum of her computer, the pressure of her heartbeat. She does this every night for a week, and something subtle shifts. She begins to notice that being here is not the same as being lost. She has taken one breath of her own consciousness back. William James would have smiled at that. He believed that the first step toward sanity is the power to choose what you attend to for even 1 minute. He compared attention to a muscle that weakens with neglect and strengthens with use. He said that our lives are what we choose to notice and nurture. So in a world that steals your focus every second, mental health might not be about doing more, but about training yourself to look again at what is already present tonight when you lie in bed. Notice the space between your breaths. That pause is you. It is the part of your mind that watches without reacting, and that stillness is not absence, it is strength. Another man, let's call him Karim, feels paralyzed by constant news and notifications. He's lost faith in people, in himself, in the future. He drinks coffee, but it tastes like nothing. He knows he's spiraling, yet he keeps scrolling because silence feels worse. One morning, his phone dies mid-scroll, and out of frustration he takes a walk. He notices the sound of his own shoes, the wind brushing past a tree, and for the first time in months he realizes that nothing outside him has changed, but something inside has softened. That single moment of attention becomes a seed from which faith can grow. Faith for James was not blind belief, but the courage to act as if the good in you is real even when you cannot feel it. He believed that healing the mind was not about erasing pain, but about choosing to believe that a better thought is worth trying. Once more, this is the psychology of hope, the decision to engage with life as an unfinished experiment. Every time you choose to try again, to speak honestly, to rest kindly, you are conducting an experiment in consciousness, one that can reshape your mental world. The truth is, mental health today is not broken because we lack treatments. It is broken because we have forgotten meaning. People are medicated but not motivated, connected but not truly seen. William James didn't offer a cure, he offered participation. He invited you to be curious about your own experience, to observe your mind like a scientist, and to live like a poet when your thoughts spiral. Ask yourself gently, where is my attention right now? And is it serving me? This small act of noticing can loosen the tightest anxiety. The modern world tells you to optimize, but James tells you to humanize. He would say, take 1 minute to watch a leaf float in water and see if your mind can stay there, if it wanders. Bring it back again and again, not as punishment, but as practice, because attention is the doorway to peace, and peace is not a destination, it is a discipline. In this way, the lessons of a man from the 19th century might be exactly what the 21st century needs. Again, mental health is not just managing your brain, it is remembering your soul. And that is where part 1 ends, where the quiet work begins in the choice to attend to what matters now. When William James looked at the human mind, he did not see a machine to fix. He saw a flame to tend. He believed that inside every person there is a moral energy waiting to be awakened, the energy that says yes when everything else in you says no. In 2025, people are exhausted, not just from working too much, but from trying too hard to be what they think they should be, the curated versions of themselves that chase validation and run from silence. James would call that the tyranny of the persona, the public self that tries to please while the private self grows lonelier. This conflict between the two selves creates the quiet sickness of our age, the sense that no matter what we achieve, we are somehow behind our own lives. He once described the sick soul as someone who feels life to be a disappointment, even when everything looks fine on the surface. That is the fatigue that hides behind so many smiles today. We scroll through feeds that show us perfection, and we forget that real life is not symmetrical. It is messy and rhythmic and deeply alive. James believed that healing begins when we stop treating discomfort as disease and start listening to it as information. Anxiety, he said, is often the mind's way of signaling that we are living divided between what we feel and what we perform. There is a young teacher named Layla who spends her nights grading papers and her mornings doubting her worth. She loves teaching, but dreads the noise of the classroom because every raised voice feels like failure. One day she writes on the board, "In shaky chalk, you are allowed to begin again." She tells her students, it's okay to forget, it's okay to start over. And as she speaks, she feels something she hasn't in years, her own permission to be imperfect. That small permission becomes her medicine. Each night she repeats it aloud before sleep. She does not know it yet, but she is practicing what James called the will to believe. She is choosing faith in her own unfinished self. James believed that mental health is not the absence of struggle, but the presence of direction. He said that if you cannot find purpose, then create one by committing to something that gives your day shape, even if it is small. Because purpose does not descend from heaven, it grows from repetition. Believe that our nervous systems can be re-educated by daily acts of will. Tonight he would tell you to write one line that begins with "tomorrow I will," and then keep it small. Tomorrow I will eat breakfast before touching my phone. Tomorrow I will step outside and breathe for 2 minutes. This is not positive thinking. It is practical faith, the kind that rewires attention through action. Another man, let's call him Omar, spends hours at his desk, doing a job that no longer feeds him. He dreams of leaving, but fear keeps him frozen. One night he reads about James and something strikes him. James wrote that belief creates the fact, and Omar wonders if maybe he has been waiting for proof before giving himself permission to live. He takes a notebook and writes, "I believe I can change, not I wish not. I hope, but I believe." The next morning, nothing magical happens yet. When his boss criticizes him, he notices he doesn't crumble like before, because belief is not about results. It is about restoring agency to a tired mind. In a world obsessed with outcomes, James offers the radical idea that trying is already winning. He said that to exert effort, even when uncertain, is to awaken the will, and when the will awakens, the mind begins to heal. The modern word for this might be resilience, but James framed it more beautifully as the moral equivalent of war, the quiet heroism of fighting within yourself for the right to stay kind, the right to stay awake, the right to keep choosing life. If you feel lost in 2025, it is not because you are broken. It is because you are being pulled by too many false lights. James would invite you to turn off the noise and ask one question. What do I truly care about right now? Not tomorrow, not next year, but now, because meaning is not something you find at the end of success. It is something you build in the small rituals of your day, the way you speak to yourself, the way you notice sunlight on your wall, the way you keep faith with your own effort. He would say, start where you are, strengthen the muscle of focus by bringing your attention back to what you love when your mind wanders. Forgive it gently and return to the task. Not because you must, but because this is how you learn to live again. The cure he offered was not grand, it was humble. It was a daily practice of noticing, willing, believing, and repeating until the divided self becomes whole again. And in that wholeness, peace begins to grow quietly, like light returning to a forgotten room. There comes a moment in every restless life when the noise outside finally fades and the silence within becomes unbearable. That is the point where most people reach for distraction. But William James would say, that is the doorway to awakening. Because when the outer world goes quiet, the inner one starts to speak. And though its voice may tremble, it always tells the truth. In 2025, the greatest illness is not anxiety or depression alone. It is disconnection. People have lost the thread that ties thought to meaning, feeling to presence, being to belonging. James believed that psychology without spirit is like a body without breath, and what he meant by spirit was not religion, but the living pulse of awareness that makes life worth carrying forward. He would say that to heal the mind, we must learn again to participate in the mystery of being alive. Think of consciousness as a sea of currents. Each thought, emotion, and memory moving like waves. When you fight them, you drown, but when you watch them, you float. James called this the stream of consciousness, not a theory, but a direct experience. He encouraged his students to observe their thoughts as if watching a river, and in that observation, something profound happens. The watcher appears. And that watcher is not the chaos it sees, it is the calm below the noise, the simple awareness that says, I am. And that realization changes everything. Because the moment you can say, I am watching this pain, instead of, I am this pain, you begin to reclaim your inner freedom. There is a woman named Sarah who wakes up each morning with the same loop of dread. Her heart races before she even opens her eyes. She fears the day will collapse on her before it begins. She tries every trick, affirmations, journaling, even cold showers, but nothing sticks until one evening she reads a line from James about the power of attention. She decides to try something new. Instead of fighting the dread, she will sit with it. She closes her eyes and imagines the fear as a small trembling creature inside her chest. She breathes and says softly, I will not chase you. I will not run from you. I will only watch. And something unexpected happens. The creature shrinks, not because it has vanished, but because it has been seen. This is the beginning of healing, the return of the self that observes without judgment. James was deeply inspired by the idea that human beings are explorers of inner space, not victims of it. He believed that mental suffering often comes from confusing our passing moods with our permanent identity. When you say, I'm anxious, your mind believes it. But if you say, there is anxiety moving through me, something inside loosens. The problem does not disappear, but your relationship to it changes. That is the art of detachment, not indifference, but intimacy without identification. The modern world sells comfort, but James taught courage. He said that to live meaningfully is to accept risk, the risk of believing in something unseen, the risk of loving, without guarantee, the risk of continuing, when nothing seems certain. He would remind us that mental strength grows from voluntary acts of faith, when you choose to keep going, not because you know it will work, but because you feel it might. You strengthen what he called the moral will. And this will is the unseen muscle of the soul. Imagine a student named Arif who fails his exam after months of study. He feels humiliated. He begins to tell himself he is not smart enough, that his dreams are foolish. His mind builds a prison of self-blame. One night he reads about James and the idea that belief precedes fact. He writes on a scrap of paper, I am not done yet. He places it under his pillow and goes to Sleep. Nothing grand happens yet. Something within him realigns. The next morning, he studies again, not out of hope, but out of defiance. Within weeks, he passes the retake, but more importantly, he feels alive again, because he remembered that worth is not measured by outcome but by participation. William James would look at our digital lives today and see a battlefield of attention. He would warn that when everything demands your focus, nothing receives your devotion. He would urge you to reclaim your attention not by cutting off the world, but by training yourself to return to what matters. Every time your mind scatters, you can say softly, "Come back here," and notice your breath. That gentle returning again and again is not weakness. It is mastery. He believed that small deliberate acts could transform character if you feel lost. Write one sentence beginning with, "I am still learning to," and finish it without editing. I am still learning to rest. I am still learning to trust. I am still learning. To stay, this practice does not fix you, it reveals you. Because James understood that healing is not becoming someone new. It is remembering who you already are beneath the noise. So as 2025 races forward and the world spins faster than thought perhaps, the real revolution is not in technology or therapy, but in attention itself. James left us a timeless reminder that every mind can heal when it learns to observe itself without fear, to believe in its own unseen strength, and to choose again even. When choosing feels small, that is how the divided self becomes whole. Not in perfection, but in participation in the ongoing experiment of being human. Sometimes the most powerful medicine is not a pill or a plan, but a pause, a single unbroken moment. When you decide to stop running from your own mind, William James would say that the cure for despair is action, and the cure for confusion is attention. But the kind of attention he meant was not mental effort. It was awareness that feels like breathing. He believed that people in pain often try to escape their thoughts by thinking harder, instead of seeing that thought itself can become gentle, that awareness can hold emotion without drowning in it, and that a person who learns this becomes their own healer in 2025, that wisdom feels revolutionary because the modern world teaches speed, while the soul heals in slowness. Imagine a quiet kitchen at dawn. A woman named Hannah sits at the table, her phone face down beside a cup of tea. She has not spoken to her family in months. Her job feels empty, and she cannot explain why her mind feels split in two. One part rushing with fear, the other numb with silence. She remembers reading about James and how he spoke of the divided self, the one that lives on the surface and the one that waits below. She decides to try an experiment for 1 week. She will write one sentence every morning, beginning with, "I am listening." She does not force the words. She just lets them come. I am listening to my restlessness. I am listening to my hunger. I am listening to my need for kindness. And slowly the fog inside her begins to thin, because when the soul feels heard, it stops screaming. James said that human beings do not live by facts alone. They live by meaning, and meaning is something you build, not find. He would say that the mind needs faith the way the body needs food, not religious faith but psychological faith, the belief that your effort still matters, that your experience still counts, even when unseen in the quiet of your own heart. This is what he called the will to believe, a phrase that has been misunderstood for generations. It was never about blind belief. It was about creative courage to act as if the good in you is real, and through that act make it real. A man named Amir learns this truth the hard way. He spends his nights awake, drowning in guilt for mistakes he cannot change. He tells himself it is too late, that people like him do not get second chances. One evening, a friend sends him a line from James' Act, as if what you do makes a difference. It does. He laughs bitterly at first, but then something strange happens. The next morning, he helps an old man carry groceries across the street, and for a brief second, he feels something alive flicker inside him. The smallest act has pierced his own despair, and from that seed he starts again. James would say that this is not sentimentality. This is the law of inner motion, the truth that action, even without certainty, restores meaning to the mind. He warned that if we wait for perfect proof before we act, we will never move, because certainty is the slowest form of faith in 2025, that advice matters more than ever. People want guarantees. They want therapy that always works, habits that always stick, love that never hurts. But James would whisper that life is not about guarantees. It is about participation. Every time you choose to engage with the world, even trembling, you add to the moral energy of existence. That energy is contagious, and healing flows through it like warmth through a cold room. He also believed in what he called plasticity, the capacity of the nervous system to form new paths through repeated effort long before neuroscience proved it. He understood that the mind can be reshaped by the choices you practice daily. He said that every small decision plants a seed in your character. The more you choose kindness, courage, or focus, the more these become automatic. It is how habits become identity, and identity becomes peace. He would tell you that your mental health is not in what you feel today, but in what you practice, despite what you feel. Try this tonight before sleep. Close your eyes and recall one moment from your day when you acted from love, not for approval, but from genuine care. It could be smiling at a stranger, finishing a hard task, or forgiving yourself for a mistake. Hold that memory for 10 seconds. Then whisper, "Thank you to the part of you that chose that moment." It sounds simple, but it rewires the mind toward gratitude and presence. James would call that the education of attention, the art of choosing where to let your soul rest. He believed that once you learn to direct attention inward without fear, you begin to see that the self is not a single fixed thing, but a living field of possibilities. And from that awareness, mental health stops being a project and becomes a rhythm, a balance between effort and surrender. The person who learns to live this way does not eliminate pain. They learn to move with it like a sailor who knows the sea cannot be controlled, but can be navigated. And perhaps that is what William James truly meant when he said, "The greatest weapon against stress is our ability to choose one thought over another." It was not about control, it was about participation, choosing to stay awake within your own life. And as Hannah writes her final sentence at the end of the week, she realizes that she no longer feels broken. She feels real, not healed, not fixed, but real. She has begun to trust her own listening, and in that simple faith she finds something James spent his life trying to describe: the quiet courage of being human. There comes a soft evening when everything that used to hurt begins to sound like music far away, when you realize that healing was never about escaping the storm, but about learning how to move through it with open eyes. William James believed that life does not get easier, it gets deeper. He would say that sanity is not the absence of struggle, but the rediscovery of rhythm, the ability to dance again with your own thoughts without fearing their weight. And that is the moment when the divided self becomes whole. Not perfect, but whole, because you have stopped treating your pain as an enemy and started to see it as a teacher. In 2025, surrounded by noise, this kind of peace feels like rebellion. He would tell you to look around your ordinary life, the tea cooling on your desk, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the echo of your own breath, and to see that the sacred is hiding in these simple things when you give your full attention to what is in front of you. Even briefly, you reclaim a piece of your own power. The mind quiets because it is no longer searching for meaning elsewhere. It is living meaning here. That is what he meant when he said that faith is the readiness to act on what you see when you cannot see it fully. It is not belief in magic. It is belief in movement, in showing up again and again in your own small ways. There is a student named Anya who has spent years fearing her own voice. She writes poems she never shares. She deletes them before anyone can see. One day, she reads about James and decides to try something new. She prints one poem and pins it to a wall in her room. No one else sees it, but she does, and every morning she reads it softly, and every morning her chest feels less heavy, until one day she finds the courage to send it to a friend. That single act becomes her quiet revolution. James would say that she has crossed the invisible line between potential and participation, and that is where the healing of the self begins. Mental health is not about escaping reality. It is about learning how to belong inside it, to see that you are not your past or your projections. You are the awareness that holds them both. You are the witness that keeps returning to life, no matter how many times it breaks you. William James left behind more than books. He left a living invitation to rediscover the miracle of choice, the power of voluntary attention, the will to believe, and the courage to keep loving this strange, unfinished world. And if you do that even once a day, even for a minute, you are already healing, you are already home. The next time you feel lost, remember this. You do not have to fix your mind, you have to befriend it. You do not have to be fearless, you have to stay present. You do not have to have faith in everything, you only need to have faith in the next small good act within your reach. And if you do that enough times, your life will begin to feel less like a battle and more like a conversation between your soul and the world, the end.